Welcome to First Responder Financial Freedom Podcast. We talk to first responders all over the nation who are investing and working on businesses outside of their first responder jobs. Our goal is to motivate and educate each other and help provide a better financial understanding for a better future. Now here are your hosts, Mike Webb, Tyler Thrush, and Aaron Foster.
All right. We are First Responder Financial Freedom back here with Mike Webb, Tyler Thrush, myself, Aaron, and our illustrious Kyle Robertson, who is a former firefighter out in Oregon, grew up in the Ozarks. We were just talking about that a couple minutes ago. I'm actually going to pick his brain about what he thinks about the show shortly. He's been a multifamily investor for a long time. He comes from Scottish roots, and he has dog envy of my Irish Wolfhounds. Other than that, Kyle, thanks for coming on and hanging out with us today, bro. I see you joined the retired Bearded Wonder gang that's coming off soon. So tell me how you went from fire department to real estate. Like, what was your precursor?
Yeah. Hey, thanks guys for having me on. And illustrious, man. I've been called a lot of things in my life, but that's not one of them. So thanks, Aaron. Appreciate that. But yeah, man, I've been in the real estate game for a while now. I got my first place back in about 2004. And it was just actually, that was my first purchase, and it was a house I lived in. It didn't actually become a rental till 2008. And I became a fireman in 07. So there's a lot of overlap here with, the fire service and real estate investing. But everybody knows what happened in 08. Crash came, couldn't sell the thing. I got married in 08 also. So my wife and I went off and bought our own house. And so we planned on selling this place, wouldn't sell. Never had any interest in being a landlord. That just was not tickling my fancy by any means. But didn't have a choice, couldn't sell the thing. So I went ahead and put a renter in it. I live in a college town, so we put some doctor students in there, and we kept it for probably about 4 more years in that capacity and decided to sell it then. So we didn't really call ourselves landlords. We were just biding our time till we can get rid of the thing. And then we finally were able to, sold it, and took the money, paid the taxes. Learned a valuable lesson there. It was a 5-digit tax bill that I got from the sale of that place because I'd rented it out for the past 4 years. And so at that point I was like, yeah, screw real estate. This is stupid. I got to pay Uncle Sam a whole bunch of money. There's no tax benefits in this. Are you kidding me? This is ridiculous. Just because I didn't know what I was doing, right? Fast forward about another year and decided to give it a shot again because another fireman had a storage unit facility, and he was like, hey, I'm trying to get rid of this thing. Nobody's interested. The market's pretty depressed. You have any interest in trying this out? Because it's a great cash flow deal. Just give it a shot. So I said, okay, but I'm not going to qualify. How am I going to buy a storage unit deal, right? I've never done commercial real estate before. Banks aren't going to look at me. I've got no industry experience. And he said, well, I'm going to do you a solid here. And I'm going to get you, how about we do some seller financing on this, which I had no idea what seller financing was. And he said, essentially, I'm just going to be the bank for you. I'll just be the bank. You make your payments to me. You're on the deed, or excuse me. You're on the deed. This is your property. You make the payments to me. We'll give you a 6% interest rate, blah, blah, blah. I said, all right, well, let's give it a shot. And so that was my first kind of foray into being a real estate investor, was into the commercial world. And it went really well. We kept it for 3 years, and I think we paid $165 for it and sold it for $325 3 years later. So we doubled our money and did nothing to it except for cash flow. So it was, it was a pretty good gig.
So let's take a step back. I want to go over. So Mike just bought his first storage unit facility in Shepherdstown, West Virginia. What are some things that you learned? We're going to jump way ahead now in the commercial world. What did you learn in the couple of years that you owned it? Because it's starkly different than the residential world.
Yeah, man, it's night and day different, totally different. But, to be perfectly honest with you, this was back in 2013, 2012, somewhere in that range. And I didn't really learn a lot. I wasn't listening to Bigger Pockets at that time. I wasn't educating myself as a real estate investor. I just bought the thing thinking, all right, well, this will make me some extra money. I didn't realize there was this thing called return on investment, ROI. I didn't even know what that was. At that time, I was calling it my bottom line. So my wife and I were talking. I was like, all right, we only had to put $10,000 down on this deal. I just got to get my bottom line back. That's all I care about. And if the cash flow is correct, I'll have this back in 6 months. And we did. We got the money back from our down payment, the $10,000 within 6 months. And I was like, all right, now it's instead of infinite return, and now it's just straight profit. It's straight profit all the time, So I really did own that thing for 3 straight years, just collecting a paycheck, not doing any education on the deal whatsoever. I learned a lot of things about managing commercial, such as doing, specific to storage units, like, doing auctions are totally not worth it most of the time. It's definitely not like you see on TV. Essentially, by the time we were ready, we sold the place. We were just selling all these things for $1 to anybody that would come clean them out, because all people want to store is their trash. And it's, they look at it as sentimental value things, and there's really not much valuable things that people will leave and abandon inside of storage units. So but I did start to learn things about accounting and bookkeeping and the importance of actually following a budget when it comes to these sorts of things. So yeah, it was a wonderful learning experience, but we did sell it after 3 years, and that's when we jumped into the residential world.
How come you sold the property?
So, gosh, that's a kind of a loaded question. Before I was doing I've always been a buy and sell guy. I don't know why. It's just in my blood, I guess. Call it the entrepreneurial spirit, but I get bored of stuff really fast. So I can do something and we become successful. I'm like, yeah, screw this. I'm going to try something else now. And this was super successful. We were doing well and making a lot of money at it, but I was like, what else can we try? So another storage unit complex was built about 6 lots down on the same road. And it was a smaller one. And I stopped in one day and said, hey, man, I've got this one down here. You interested? You're just getting ready to finish construction on this one. You want to just, add some units to what you got and call it, brand it the same and blah, blah, blah. And he said, yeah, absolutely. I would love to. And I told him what my price was. And by the end of the following week, we were at escrow closing. So, I mean, it was kind of a really quick deal. And we ended up doing our first 1031 exchange at that point.
1031s are a moneymaker, literally and figuratively.
Dude, they're so huge. Yeah, it's crazy. And I wish I'd have known about it earlier, but yeah, they're huge.
So let's back up a hair, because we went from like here to here really quick. So kind of like you got in the fire service about 07 or 08. What prompted you to start looking at real estate? Is that something you did prior to getting on the job, or is that what sparked that interest to kind of go from W-2 to entrepreneur?
Yeah. So in 2004, so my dad owned a real estate brokerage, and, so I got out of high school and I was a complete screw off, did everything wrong all the time, and my dad was always trying to tell me, hey, come get a real job, become a realtor, come do something to make you some real money. And I was like, nah, I'm too busy going out to the bar and doing fun stuff. I don't want to go to school and, try to get my real estate license. And, I spent a few years, just being that guy for a little while. And eventually my dad kind of talked me into it. And so I went and I got my real estate license and started working for him in 2004. And same year that I bought my first house. And, 2007, things started looking pretty ugly in the real estate market. And I mean, we were slaying it 04, 05, 06 even, and just doing really well in real estate sales. And I could kind of see the writing on the wall in the market back in 07 that things were starting to get really ugly and, or were going to get really ugly. And so I decided to kind of pivot. And I had a gal that just started, brand new realtor in 2007, who I was supposed to be mentoring. And she did it for about 6 months, decided she didn't like being a realtor, and she went and got a job at the fire department as an administrative assistant. And it turned out her husband was a battalion chief at a neighboring town. So and I told her, I was like, I've always wanted to try this, be a volunteer and see what it's like to be a volunteer fireman. And she's like, we'll talk to my husband and see if this would work for you. And so I did. And he actually gave me an intern spot where they pay you. So I started doing both. I was doing both real estate and being a fireman at the same time. I was only working every 6th day at that point as an intern at this neighboring department, and became a volunteer firefighter in my own town at the same time. So two departments plus real estate. And then when 08 happened, I was like, screw this, went and got my degree as a paramedic, and then got hired on at my house for in 2008 2008.
You paramedics, man, that's the golden ticket for every department to get on. Like, if you get that, it's like, shower me with your gold and your praise, and I'll come work for you.
Yeah, we need the boxes, right? Yeah, for these magic hands that we have. But no, it wasn't what I thought it was. All I wanted to do was be a fireman. I never wanted to be a medic, and man, you fast forward 14 years. And that's essentially what became the straw that broke the camel's back. Is I was just done. I didn't want to be a medic anymore. And in my department where I live, you can't get hired on as a professional fireman unless you're actually a paramedic. That's the way that it worked back then. So that's why I got my medic. Otherwise, I never would have done it in the first place. And so I got my medic and got hired on, and instantly got stuck on an ambulance for the next 5 years. And we called it the soul crusher. You know, it was just, you're up all night. We run a lot of interfacility transfers where you got to go from one hospital to another all hours of the night. You know, they'll send them at 1 o'clock in the morning up to Portland, which is a 4-hour round trip. And that's regular. That happens just about every day, you know. And so you get these guys just walking around like zombies. And I became just a complete piece of crap at home. And I wasn't a fun guy to live with. And I just knew something had to change.
Dude, that's a whole nother level. That's like literally medical Uber. Whereas at least we only do emergency response. So like interfacility transport, like no thanks.
It's I feel
we could go down that road, but I think we'll all just agree that we can save ourselves about 30 minutes and probably all be like, no way.
Yeah.
So So okay, so you kind of were in both, doing a little real estate, doing a little fire department. When did you decide like, hey, I'm gonna maybe kick it up a little bit and see what I can make of this real estate agent and or investor thing? Because I don't know, maybe if you started as an agent first, then became an investor. Everybody at work, I shouldn't say everybody, mostly everybody at work still thinks I'm a real estate agent. Yeah. And I just basically don't even try and explain it to them anymore. Just saves myself a lot of headache. So did you start out as an agent, then segue into investor, or were you doing both simultaneously, or how did that look?
Yeah. So when I finally got hired on at the fire department full-time, got that job, I stopped being a realtor full-time and kind of went down to a very casual type of a position because I was making good money at the fire department. And I didn't really feel like I needed to do the real estate thing. And plus business was crap when I first started at the fire department. Business in real estate was crap. So I kind of slowed it down, just did business, did some listings or sales for close friends and family from about 2008 till 2011. And then I just let my license go entirely in 2011. But everybody, like just the same as you, even the guys at the fire department, especially, they still think I'm a licensed realtor. I'll still get people that call me up that I work with every third day who's like, "Hey, I was wondering if you can give me an opinion on the value of my house." I'm like, "No, I haven't been a realtor forever.
I'm not an agent."
Yeah, I can give you an opinion. Anybody can give you an opinion, but I have no freaking clue, man. You need to talk to somebody that does this on a regular basis. I just buy investment properties, and it doesn't matter how many times you say that. And so just like you, Mike, I kind of gave up on explaining it. And I just became full-time, or I became primarily investor after 2011 and no more sales.
So I got a question for you. Have you ever bought properties from friends of yours?
Yeah, the storage unit complex. Actually, I bought more than that. I bought the storage unit complex from a coworker. And then after that, we bought 2 duplexes that were side by side. And that was from a coworker from the real estate office. So it was an elderly gal who I'd worked with for, ever since 2004. And I'd known her way before that because she worked for my dad. And she had finished the depreciation, 27 and a half years of depreciation on these 2 duplexes and was ready just to let them go. So, I bought those from her off market. It ended up being pretty much the springboard for, the storage units was the springboard for investing, but that got us into the residential side.
So let me ask you another loaded question. That's a softball for you. Do you think relationships play a part in, and relationships and networking play a part in your real estate endeavors?
Oh man. Yeah. I hate to do the overused, your network is your net worth thing. 'Cause I think that almost applies a lot more to people that are doing partnerships. And I know a lot of people will fight me on this, but I've gone through kind of some, some soul searching on my personal business and how I do things today. I'm not a real estate syndicator. I don't do partnerships. Everything I own is just my own. And a lot of the stuff I bought has just been on market stuff that's been kind of seasoned and sitting there for a long time overpriced. And so I'm sitting here thinking like, how important are these relationships? All I'm doing is buying these from complete strangers, right? Well, the fact of the matter is it works both ways. Those places that I bought from my friends, if I didn't know them or wasn't friends with them or they didn't like me, then I never would have been able to buy these things and get the kind of deals that I did. I've learned that networking is an absolute art form. It's just you can waste a lot of time on networking too. If there's something out there that if you're specifically looking for something in the commercial space or residential space or whatever, and you get somebody that gives you a call and says, "Hey, can I spend 30 or can take 30 minutes of your time and you tell me everything that you do in real estate so I can learn something?" That gets really difficult after a while because there's just not enough hours in the day. So I kind of almost target my networking at this point. I try to be the dumbest person in the room. That way I can actually be that sponge to soak things up, because there really is a wrong way to network and a right way to network where it actually is the most beneficial for your time.
So a lot of things is very focused, and one of the things that people don't do is they kind of go into real estate and they're like, I want multifamilies, I want single families, I want residential, I want commercial, I want warehouse space. Like, it seems like you dialed into what you want to do now, and you know kind of what avenues you want to be in. I had this conversation with one of our other bearded wonder friends, Ian, where we're like, okay, we're tired of residential real estate. Like, what's next? And then they bought a warehouse, and they bought a apartment complex, and now they're buying storage unit facilities. And I'm like, well, sweet Jesus, like, don't leave me in the dust, bro. No, but the thing is like a lot of people, they don't focus on what they want to do in real estate because they don't know. So it's kind of like it's a shotgun blast, and like, well, hopefully this hits something. Do you focus on one area now? Like, what's your current goals for what you're going after?
Yeah, it kind of goes back to that jack of all trades but master of none thing. It's like, in my personal opinion, and there's a million different ways to invest, but at the same time, it's like, the way that I look at it is you do it until it's right and it becomes boring. And when it becomes boring but successful, then I think you've kind of made it at that point. Because then you can refine things. It may be super boring, but at the same time, you look at the bank account and you're like, all right, well, that's why I'm doing this, right? And also the happiness piece of it. When I do speaking engagements, I always kind of talk about the mindset and happiness piece of this. My happiness comes from being successful, just doing something the right way and seeing the fruits of my labor. That really is a big why for me. The biggest being my time, obviously, which I think it would be for most people. But yeah, it's like you figure out what works and you just do that. And it's okay to branch out once, in my opinion, once you've actually made it to that point where you've hit that success button. Then, you can try other things. I have shiny object syndrome like nobody else, man. I'm telling you right now, it's like, if I see someone like, well, shit, I can make quite a bit of money doing this, I'm going to try it. It's just, that's much to my wife's displeasure sometimes. We're kind of all over the place. I've got like 6 different businesses going. And it's just, I want to see what works because I have the freedom and the time and the financial freedom to be able to pursue those goals. But I never forget my real estate. When it comes to multifamily real estate, which is where I'm at now, apartment complexes, I've made it boring, and that's okay because it's on autopilot now. And I have the ability to kind of branch out to some other stuff.
So one of the things that we have in common is our Scottish ancestry. And I was reading a book, this is a while ago, and it says people with Scottish roots are 3 times more likely to be millionaire in the U.S., historically speaking. And it's because a lot of them, they focus on like one aspect of their career. It could be iron, it could be, industrial, it can be, woodworking, but they try to go after one thing because it's kind of ingrained in their culture. And I thought it was kind of interesting, and because you're like, once you focused on real estate, you kind of went after all aspects of real estate. And then you're like, oh, well, let me focus on this. Let me try this. You might get a little bit more scatter shot with your shotgun blast, but like it's all in the real estate target. Yeah. I'm kind of the same way. Before we started this conversation on here, I was talking about there's a company in Scotland, or a castle in Scotland, where he sells off a square foot of land. And I bought Mike and Tyler a square foot of land. So now we're all lairds. And I think you did too. So we're all lairds of Scotland. And I'm like, well, how can I transition this into the next thing? Like, what can I do? And of course, Tyler sent me a picture of a squirrel with a shining object, like looking around, like, oh, look at this squirrel, shining object. All right. But I guess it goes to show, like, if you have motivation, it's great. But if you don't have focus, that motivation will get sidetracked. So you got to focus on one thing.
Yeah.
So what do you, I know you're doing mentorship now. I know you're doing coaching now. Can you tell me a little bit like how you transitioned into that?
Yeah, I think really what it came down to is I was just bored. The way that I've got my business set up on the real estate side is everything is managed by professional management companies. And so I would have a conversation with them about once a month. Twice a month. They would send me, my monthly owner statements, and I'd get a chance to look through that. And then we would discuss it a week afterwards. And that was the extent of what I was spending on time on my real estate. And, that sounds wonderful, right? It sounds like, oh my gosh, that's great. It's on autopilot. You don't have to do shit. It's more of you just kind of relaxed. You got all the time in the world. But the fact is, when you have an entrepreneurial mindset, you just get bored and you're just like, holy crap, what am I going to do with my time? And so way back in another life, I wanted to be a teacher. That was my ultimate goal, is I wanted to be a teacher. And so I was like, let's combine the two of these things and start a real estate mentorship program where I do nothing but tell people and teach people from step 1 to step 10,000 exactly what it is that I do, how to find properties, underwrite markets, how to get under contract, and also walk them right through the process of, not even using real estate brokers, because that's kind of, a real big, I guess, a sticking point for people, is they feel like they need that, I guess, that guardianship, that hand holding that happens in a real estate transaction, which is perfectly fine. But I don't use realtors unless I have to. And I want to show them that there's another world out there where you can really do things on your own, and so that's kind of what it came down to. And I just do word of mouth. I don't do any advertising for my mentorship business. And yeah, it's been great. It's a wonderful time, a wonderful way to network anyways. I've had a lot of success and even done talks about, partnering with some of my mentees, but we haven't got that far yet.
So Mike has had somebody reach out to him and ask him about doing mentorship. And it ended up being a couple $1,000s, and he guaranteed a sale within a couple months. But like a couple $1,000s, spend 5 to get 10 makes sense to me. Like, I don't see why you wouldn't do it. Mike, can you go over like what your parameters were? You don't really want to do it, but like you gave this guy parameters. What were they?
I basically said, hey man, everything is available on these podcasts in this group and whatnot. And he just kept like, hey, I need somebody to hold me accountable. I need somebody to do this. And I need one more thing to do, kind of Kyle's statement. Like, this board behind me is like, I frankly have enough on my plate, but I was like, all right, well, if I'm going to devote time, like, and this has been a big mindset thing, like, then I'm going to have to charge for it. And it's one of those things, like, I love to just give away, but like at the end of the day, I only have so much time.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. 100%.
And I also have found, and this is with just about everything in life, and I'm the same type, I'm myself included. Like, when you pay for it, you tend to take it a little more serious. So, my thing is like, okay, well, I'm going to require X number of dollars, and this is the amount of time I'm willing to devote to it. And I know that I'll probably go over that time allotment. However, like, if you're not willing to spend X, then honestly, you're telling me without telling me what I need to know about your level of commitment to this endeavor. So it's one of those things, like, I said, hey, this is what I'd be willing to do. And I'm not a coach. I never really set out to be a coach. I'm not advertising that I'm a coach, but this person kept asking, and I said, this is what I'd be willing to do. So I said, here's the link for payment, because then it was like, all right, we're going to see whether you want to do this or not. And it's like, well, I got to do this and I'll get back to you. I'll be back out of town and whatnot. So that was basically like, okay, cool. I'm not going to devote another ounce of my mental capacity and bandwidth to this endeavor until that person commits to it. And that's not meant to sound shitty. That's basically meant to say, like, hey, I've got all this other stuff to do. And when you're ready, if I'm still able to deliver what we talked about, cool. If not, hey, I know a great guy named Kyle. Here's his number. Give him a shout.
Appreciate that, man. I mean, 100%. That's the exact same conversations, and kind of the mentorship thing stemmed from the number of people that were just reaching out, because all of us are somewhat, active on social media. And so if you post enough stuff and you maybe post some wins, post some losses, and just post some experiences, people are going to start reaching out to you because they want to follow you in some way, shape, or form. Right. And it's like, I really do appreciate that big time. But the fact is I just, if I'm going to spend all this time, explaining my story 100 times over, then I'm going to have to start charging for my time, because I need to monetize something. Right. It's just the way that it works.
At the end of the day, we all got bills, right? And that's why I kind of like the whole podcast thing. Is I was just looking at the website we used to like send all this out, just kind of the statistics. And it's like, I mean, we're kind of fumbling around in the dark here. We're not really making a ton of progress, but we're getting several hundred people to download each episode. So if you think about it, it's like, well, we're having this conversation. It's like, well, if you had this conversation 600 times, that's a lot of your time, right?
Yeah.
Where here, this in essence, this conversation can be had 600 times by having it once. So it's like the whole one to many concept, which super fan of. So Kyle, you said now you're into apartment investing, right? So can you kind of talk about what you were doing while you were still on the fire department, how many units, how you were managing, because I believe you're out of state. How did you get comfortable with doing that? And kind of like what your business has transitioned to a little bit?
Yeah. So man, I hit a point in my career, probably in about 2015, give or take. And I was pretty miserable at that point. I wasn't happy with what I was doing by any means. That things had just kind of started to spiral out of control. I hated getting up in the morning and going to work. And so I figured that, hey, the only way that I can get off this ambulance is to promote, right? So I was like, all right, I'm going to promote. So I studied really hard, failed the first promotion exam, and passed the second one and got skipped over. And then finally by the third one, I got my promotion, became a lieutenant, got me off the ambulance. I was like, all right, smooth sailing from here, right? Well, then I realized that, when you've got this feeling deep down inside you that says that you need to produce, you need to create, something has to change. No amount of promotion in a job that was not giving you any happiness in the first place is going to fix that issue. It doesn't satisfy your soul anymore. And I wasn't satisfied. And so I started looking for all these different ways to try to ramp up this real estate business because I had pride in that. I was like, my gosh, this is something I created. This income is something I created that didn't exist for us before. I was super happy with what I was doing. And so I told my wife, I was like, all right, well, let's sell these duplexes that we have over here and let's move our money out of state and see if we can be successful. She said, okay. She was totally on board with that. And so we did sell those and we ended up buying a quadplex and a 12plex. And this was in Arkansas. And they went really well. Actually, the quadplex went really well. The 12plex, we closed on it and never saw it before we bought it. And we had our first shooting there the second week after we closed. That was fun. So
awesome.
Yeah, that was great. So
did you ever think about just calling the local firehouse or police department, being like, hey, what kind of calls you run at this joint? Here's the address.
A smart investor would have done this, but I was flying by the seat of my pants. I'm sitting here desperate to get out of a job I didn't like, and so we saw this deal. We're like, wow, these numbers, they work so well. This has got to be crazy. It's like it's got to be, I don't know, just unreal. So we went ahead and went with it, and that's when we learned some valuable lessons with this one. We actually still own it because we cleaned it up. And everybody around us was super appreciative of it. And the entire neighborhood started cleaning up after that. So we kind of became that shining star in a not so great area. And things are really improving there. But so, I mean, after that, I was like, look, honey, talking to my wife, I was like, honey, I need more. We need to do something serious and drastic here because I'm sure you're tired of living with me. I'm a lousy person to live with because I'm grouchy and tired all the time. I was like, let's sell everything. Let's sell the house. Let's sell the cars. Let's sell the kids. Let's sell the dog. Let's sell the whole damn thing. And let's move all of our money, all of our equity in our own house out of state and buy a bunch of multifamily. And her response was, no, we're not going to do that. She wasn't nearly as interested in doing that this time around. So anyways, we probably about another year goes by and she saw I started drinking, just being kind of a miserable person. And I think she finally realized it was time to do something drastic. And so she came around, she said, all right, fine, put the house on the market. Let's sell everything. Let's see what happens. And that's exactly what we did. We moved into a fifth wheel, ended up making around $300,000 in equity on the sale of our house, and moved into a fifth wheel for 2 years while we deployed that money into other multifamily assets around the country.
So when you decided to make that move to sell everything and kind of like leave the fire department, I've seen a lot of guys who get burned out for a lot of the same reasons that you mentioned. And it's not a talked about thing because it's one of those stigmas you're supposed to, beat your chest like, I can survive this, I can do this forever. And like it wears on you. You get to 40 years old, you get a shoulder replacement or a hip replacement, or your ankles are bad or your knees are bad or whatever it might be. Like it starts taking a toll on you, especially the ambulance for some reason. Like my hat's off to a lot of people who do this for 30 some odd years and running 20 calls a day. Like it's a different animal. So like this morning I got held over for an hour and a half and I was like, I'm at a slow house, so I was like, an hour and a half is nothing. Like, pay me time and a half for an hour and a half, I'll be happy to do it. But like if I was at a busy house and they were like I was still running calls after midnight, like 8 calls, 9 calls after midnight, I'd be a different mindset. I think it's a good thing to highlight and put a pin in is that a lot of people don't realize like you're wearing your body out, and like you're taking years off your life with not sleeping and not eating and drinking and doing the unhealthy stuff on the side when you get off of work, just to kind of like get through to your next shift. So my hat's off to you for recognizing that. It took me a while to recognize that myself. But back to real estate and investing, Tyler was talking about on our side chat. He said that there's a couple of websites. Tyler, what are those websites to check some of the crime stats that you're talking about?
Oh yeah, I was just thinking too. It's funny when Mike said that. I'm like, oh, you can go to Pulse Point, locate the area where you're going to buy, and you'll see the run volume pretty easily. And then you have Citizen app, which same thing. You'll see stuff popping off in that neighborhood, and you can kind of get a good lay of the land. Just don't trust Citizen app for fires, and don't yell structure if you see. I had a bad experience with that. I yelled structure and everybody was coming down. I said, hey, just so you know, this is on Citizen app, so I'm not sure how reliable it is, but they were showing videos. But both those apps will show you live fire department calls, PD, stuff like that. I mean, down where I work in LA, even like when they had people walking down on the street and on the bridges by downtown and stuff like that, when they were having riots in the last couple of years, you can see all that stuff live. So that just made me think, hey, it's a good tool to use. We know a lot of stuff. You, like Mike said, hey, call a local station. Those guys will be more than happy to tell you exactly what's going on in that area. Especially like Aaron said, if it's a busy area and it's 7:30 in the morning and they haven't slept all night, I'm sure it'll be real honest.
Right.
Kyle, I have a question for you too. You said that you sold everything and were deploying it into apartments all throughout the U.S. And previously you mentioned your 1031. I'm just kind of curious. Have you sold everything via 1031 since that point, or and then maybe you can explain what a 1031 is for those that don't know what it is?
Yeah, I'll give a super quick explanation of what a 1031 is. It's a 1031 exchange, and essentially what that is it's a tax deferred exchange. What it allows you to do, so let's say you own an investment property and you've not lived in it for 2 out of the last 5 years. And you decide you want to sell that thing. If you're going to sell it, Uncle Sam's going to want his cut. You're going to have to pay what's called capital gains. So a 1031 exchange, what it allows you to do is sell that investment property, and then they start a clock. And you have 45 days from the closing of that investment property that you sold to identify another place. You have to write down addresses on this piece of paper and send it off to your exchange company. And then you have 45, and then you have essentially 6 months from the date of closing on your investment property to close on one of those addresses or multiple addresses, even if you've got enough money, you want to deploy those into multiple assets. And essentially what they do, since you never got the money, they don't tax you on it. You don't have to pay taxes on that stuff. So eventually you're gonna have to pay the piper. Let's say, 30, 40 years down the road, you've done 15, 1031 exchanges. Well, when you finally do sell and retire, then you're going to have to pay taxes, but it's kind of a nice problem to have because your equity and your portfolio has grown off the merits of not having to pay those capital gains from all of those sales. And the first part of your question, yeah, we have done a couple of sales, not much. We sold a 16 unit just because we received an unsolicited offer one day, and it was just such an amazing deal. We paid $675 for 16 units over in Eastern Tennessee, which is just outside of Johnson City, Kingsport area. And loved that asset, thinking it was going to be the easiest property because at the same time we'd bought an 18 unit, which was a complete repositioning renovation. And so we bought the 16 unit thinking, hey, this can be our easy one, right? We're just going to kind of sail along with this one. Didn't really need any renovations. So we closed on that one and everything freaking broke. I mean, like we had 3 HVACs that went out. We had a hoarder. We had everything under the sun just started breaking. And so, we're 6 months in and probably about $15,000 in the hole, not making any money on it. I'm like, God, this was such a mistake. We should just list it and try to break even on it and get out of this lemon. But what ended up happening is about month number 10 of ownership, we had somebody come along and say, hey, I've got 1031 money. Do you have any interest in selling this place? And I was like, well, hell yeah, I got interest in selling this place. What are you thinking? They said, we'll give you $875 all cash. We have to close like immediately because our 1031 is about to expire, the 45 days. I was like, okay, yeah. I mean, that's what would that come out to? About $250,000 of profit. We had to wait until month 12 to be able to close that. And we did. They were fine with waiting that long to close the deal. And we took that money and bought 60 units over in Arkansas with it. So that one, and that probably became a great asset for them because we fixed everything. I didn't feel bad about selling this place because everything that broke, we fixed it and we upgraded everything. So it was probably a great asset. But at the same time, I took that 250 and ran and decided to buy a much larger piece of property.
How are you finding? So you're mentioning different states and stuff like that. How are you finding these deals? Are you contacting brokers? Are you scouring the internet? What would you say is like your main acquisition source?
Yeah. So going back to the networking thing, what I was talking about earlier was networking with other investors. I network a lot with real estate brokers and wholesalers. Those two things are some of the big ones. The commercial world, things kind of work the way that real estate used to work back before the internet. You used to have somebody that would, you'd go in and talk to a realtor and they'd input your property into their little book and call their friends. Hey, I got this place for sale. You got anybody who wants to buy it? And, there was no internet. So that's just the way that it worked. Well, commercial real estate still works really similar to that. A lot of times these places will never hit the market because they've got their own, CRMs with all their different contacts that they can shoot your property out to. And it may never see a multiple listing or LoopNet or any of that kind of stuff. So I network a lot with those guys to try to catch off market properties. It's not always a good price. I'm telling you that right now. I mean, you're still dealing with real estate brokers that are pricing these things at retail. It just may not be as much competition. And they're willing to look at LOIs. I have no problem writing letters of intent of, that makes sense for my metrics. I don't really give a crap what their listing price is. I don't really care about that at all. But I network a lot with them. Wholesalers, man, you got to vet the crap out of your wholesalers because there's some really bad ones out there. But there's also some really, really good ones too. So I deal a lot with wholesalers. I haven't done the direct mail marketing campaigns or anything like that just because I don't have the time or the desire to. And what I've done so far has worked. But I love looking at MLSs where you get some hometown realtor that doesn't really understand the commercial world so much, and they will get a listing for a multifamily property and put it on the market, and that's the only place it's at. It's just sitting there on the MLS and can't be found anywhere else where most investors are looking. And then couple that with something that sat for a while, and now all of a sudden you got a seasoned property because real estate has shelf life just like food does, right? It sits there for long enough and everybody's going to start ignoring it. And that's when I come in. I love finding those places. And I found my best deals that way because when it sits for 3 months in a hot market and it's not selling, they're usually willing to look at, maybe a lower priced offer. And then seller financing. I love seller financing. That's my number one.
One of the things that you want to go over is that, so I did my first 1031 years and years ago. And since then I've learned about DST. So Delaware State Trusts. Have you ever had any dealings with them?
No, I'm not familiar.
So there's a guy, if you guys ever want to follow him, his name is Justin Keene or Keeney, Keihne, I think it is. He's out of Florida. He puts out a little newsletter, but basically if you set up a Delaware State Trust, it's a lower return on your income. It's kind of like a syndication. So if you're at your 44 days of your 1031 and you can't find anything and you don't want to pay those taxes, then you can put it into a Delaware State Trust for the same scenario and cost savings as you could as a 1031 exchange. So I'll put this in the show notes, and I'll probably put a little thing out on the Facebook group about this. But Delaware State Trust is a nice little tool to have if you come down to your last minute and you need to put it somewhere else. So it's good to have that network in place beforehand. The deal that Mike just got, it wasn't on LoopNet, it wasn't on Crexy or one of the commercial sites either. It was listed on the MLS. But if I remember correctly, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, that the realtor was a residential realtor and she mismarketed it. Is that right?
Yeah, that's what I was talking about.
Yeah, so this has happened to me a couple times where I look at the MLS. So just to be clear, you used the terminology MLS just a minute ago when you're researching a market, but you're talking about like the actual metro area, correct?
Yes.
Like you're not talking about the multiple listing service, correct?
No, I am talking about the multiple listing service. I'm talking
okay.
I'm talking about realtor.com. I'm talking about a lot of these things that, yeah.
Okay, perfect. So I do the same thing. I look at it every single day. And I can cruise through real quick and see what's hit. And without ever even opening it, be like, no deal. Oh, no deal. And, but so the self-storage facility he's talking about that I just bought, it was listed on the MLS, but it was listed by a residential realtor who had a family member who was selling it. And they straight up said, oh, this really isn't my thing. I'm more of a residential realtor. So like
Duly noted.
it didn't show up. It didn't show up on any of the alerts that I have set up, which is basically, I mean, I don't know what I don't get an email about, but I didn't get an email about that. So the numbers, they needed massaged a little bit, but you're right. The numbers were not exactly 100% correct. However, we were able to negotiate to the price we needed it at. The other time I can think off the top of my head where that happened is that I bought a side-by-side duplex where at the time they had it listed to where it looked like you were buying half, like only one side of the duplex. So the pricing looked way jacked up. When I looked at it a little bit deeper, though, it was for both sides for the price they were advertising. And I was like, well, that's a deal. But everybody was cruising over it because the way they had it listed and the pictures and the marketing would indicate that you were buying half the duplex for that price. And they were deeded separately. So I bought them, rented it, sold one, paid the other one off, sold that. Now I hold the note on it. And it's like all because somebody uploaded it into the MLS wrong and didn't really know what they were doing. Did their sellers a huge injustice. But it was a bank, so it really didn't matter.
One of my favorite properties are two houses I bought on the cliff overlooking the water, and I bought it because nobody could figure out how to finance it or appraise it. So I used hard money bankers, hard money lending company to buy the property, and I did a subject to appraisal and said, this is what I'm going to be doing: windows, doors, doors, roof, floors, walls, yada yada yada. And they did a subject to appraisal, and the bank approved my loan on the back end after doing hard money based upon the subject to appraisal. So a lot of times it's just figuring out creative financing for these deals and finding ones that people can't figure out how to do. Kyle, what's some of your favorite holdings? Like, what do you enjoy investing in?
Man, I like buying anything with a good value add. And when I say good value add, I'm not talking about renovations. You know, a lot of people want to talk about value adds as being renovations. I'm talking about easy value adds. I'm talking about the stuff where you don't have to swing hammers. Talking about the stuff where you find that are just super under market rents. That's my favorite one because it really requires nothing of you to increase the value of this property. And since commercial properties are valued based on their income, it's super simple. You know, you wait until people get out of their lease contract and be human about it, you know, because you know, we're obviously not running a charity. You know, we're not investing to run charities. And so a good landlord is going to keep rents at market rates. And so, you know, be human about it, but let them know that you've got expenses. You've got a mortgage essentially on this place, and expenses are going up. And with that, so does the cost of the rent. But if I can go into a place and increase rents to market, and it, you know, adds significant value to my places, that's an easy win for me. Those are my favorite ones to find. You know, in just anything multifamily. I love the level of scale with multifamily, and I don't think it can be beat. I don't think there's anything out there that can match what multifamily can do. And I use the example where, you know, because people say, okay, multifamily versus single family homes, where's the big thing there? It's like, well, if you got a single family home over here that you raise $20 a month, you make an extra $20 a month, but you have 10 units over here, you raise $20 a month each. Now you got an extra $200 a month, you know. And if you buy in markets where it makes a whole lot of sense, where maybe the prices are lower, you know, the cash flow markets versus appreciation markets. I buy in cash flow markets because I live on my cash flow. So I can pick these things up for $50,000 a door, you know, and rent them out for $700, $800, even $900 a door in some cases. And where I live in Oregon, that's not possible. We can't do that. You know, houses are averaging somewhere in the $300 to $330 range for a single family home with 1,000 square foot. You know, that's a lot of money for price per square foot perspective. So a multifamily in the Midwest with easy value adds are definitely my go-to.
So this sounds like a conversation that me and Seth Teagle had. I know he's a mutual friend of ours. He also just left the fire department. He invests in multifamilies. Have you guys done the podcast with each other yet?
Yeah. I've been on his and he's been on mine.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds like a conversation that he would like to have as well. We're gonna have him on here in a couple of weeks probably. So the same thing for like when we've been looking at storage units the same way. Like if it's under market rent, if you're $100 under market rent for, you know, 25 doors, that's another $2,500 that you're going to profit. If you're under market, you just got to find those deals that are under market value. Like I just had one of my properties. I was going over my numbers recently in my Excel spreadsheets, and it was $800 increase on my taxes. And I was like, oh, that's a big number. So Now it's probably going to get passed on to the renters, and they're not going to be happy. But at the same time, like, I don't know what to tell you, like, be mad at the government. Don't be mad at me. Like, I'm not increasing my pockets. I'm increasing your rent to cover the government cost.
Right.
Yeah. So on that note, like the cash flow, and you're looking for I call it that, like the operational value add versus the physical value add.
For sure.
And so the deal I just bought, this is my first one, so who knows, this could all go to hell. But I was looking at the numbers, and I was like, man, this really seems like a deal. So when I started digging through it, they are currently charging $6.35 a square foot for the year. That's like one of the metrics these guys use. The market for non-climate controlled drive up storage is $10.58 a square foot.
Wow.
So we're charging $6.30. It should be $10.50. I don't know much, but I do know that's a pretty big gap when you think about it. And you have times that by thousands of square feet. So it's like, well, I know the income's about 50 couple now. It should be about 100,000. Like,
Yeah.
You don't have to be like a real estate expert to be like, well, that's a pretty good operational value add, right? And then there's obviously some physical components to some of that to get it to market. But yeah, so you talked about you're in Oregon, you're looking down in Arkansas and the Midwest and Southeast by the sounds of it. How did you pick those markets versus just, going to somewhere closer by?
Yeah, so it's really difficult to be a real estate investor. I was a real estate investor here for a long time, and I still am. I own a couple of assets here in Oregon. But we passed something called rent control back in 2018. And essentially, the government came out and said, you're not allowed to raise rents, no matter what they are. You're not allowed to raise rents by more than 10% per year. So that's 7% for your typical appreciation in rents, and then it's 3% for cost of living. So a total of 10% is maximum that you're allowed to raise rents in Oregon. One of my best deals was here in Oregon, like 2017, 2016, somewhere in that range, where I bought a place. It was those duplexes. Each unit, so 4 units, were renting out at $575, and the market was $1,050. And because she'd owned them for almost 30 years, she just never raised the rents. She just wanted somebody to keep paying the rent. So these people had been there for, I think the youngest tenant in there for time in the unit was something like 7 years. So I went in there and sat down with each of them at their kitchen table, and I was like, I'm sorry that she did you a disservice here by not keeping you up at market rents, but I challenge you to I have to raise your rent. They're going up to $950 a piece. I'm not even going to raise you up to market. I'm raising you, still going to be under market. And I challenge you to find anything else that's anything like this that you can rent for cheaper than that. And all of them stayed. It was pretty amazing. But I decided to go over to the Midwest because, first of all, I grew up in Missouri. I'm from the Ozarks, Southwest Missouri, Springfield, Ozark area. And so I started looking there when we first started looking at a state. And then I just branched out, and I was like, well, nothing available in Missouri at the time I was looking. So let's look in Arkansas. And I found, a 12-plex and a quadplex. So we bought those, and then we branched out from there and went into Tennessee. I'd never been to East Tennessee before. We bought 16 units there, which was the one I talked about earlier. That was wonderful. We did great. Been shopping in Wichita pretty regularly here. For your listeners, one of the ways that you can look up some markets that could be considered emerging markets is something called the Milken Report. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Milken Report, but it's the Milken Institute, and I can send you guys the link, or I'm sure you guys can find it. But they have a PDF that they print on a yearly basis, annually, I think in March, and it essentially underwrites all the markets for you. It talks about job growth, salaries, industry, and all the trends, and then they also tell you, they rank them 1 to 300 as far as your high cap cities and mid cap cities and low cap cities. And keep an eye on that because it'll give you the trends on the places that are really growing. Wichita is a really, really big one. So I'm kind of keeping my eye on that one. It is a cash flow market. You can get cheap properties for super cheap there, but it still has a lot of migration inwards. So, and then we started branching out to things like Florida. I love Florida. It's still a pretty decently cheap market. And they've got great rents. You can still get the 1% rule over there if you're looking for smaller multifamily and single family homes. Texas is another one too. A lot of these states where they have no state income tax, it's been pretty attractive because it's drawing in a lot of the retirees. So I look, my individual metrics is I need 100,000 population within 20 miles of the property and positive demographics as far as population growth goes. So I want double-digit population growth decade over decade. So you can find that just on Wikipedia. You go on Wikipedia and Google, or put the name of the city in that you're interested in, and it'll bring up a demographics tab, and it'll tell you what the table looks like. I want 10% plus for 10 years just consistently, maybe over the last 30 years that it's been growing. That shows me that there, a lot of people believe in the area.
Kyle, you keep saying cash flow market. What do you mean by cash flow market?
Yeah. So I guess
compared to what?
Yeah. So cash flow versus appreciation market. So that's the way that I look at it. And I don't know if there's anything official that says that's what that is, but I think of, Washington, Oregon, California, these are appreciation markets. What people will do is they'll invest for the appreciation that these markets offer. And they just try to hold on. So you might buy something knowing you're going to lose $500 a month, but you'll take a big chunk of capital, put it in a bank account, and know that you're going to keep this thing for 24 months. So you keep 24 months of operating expenses in an account, so you're not going to lose this, but you're expecting 20 or 30% appreciation year over year on these things, like San Francisco gets. That's an appreciation market, in my opinion. You're not going to cash flow so well there. But then you go over to somewhere like Tennessee or Arkansas, some of the, tertiary markets, not necessarily metros, like just submarkets of the metros. And you're going to get cash flow markets there where you really can get 1% rules, which is not a good metric on multifamily, but you can still do it for just a quick glance if a deal is going to work or not. You got to consider expenses and all that good stuff. But you can pick these things up for a good price per door and actually make a monthly cash flow on it, as opposed to just trying to hold on. You're not going to get the appreciation like you do there. You might get 5-6% per year, over in Eastern Tennessee, not like what you do in these appreciation markets on the West Coast.
Right. Like you said, you live off the cash flow. It's real difficult to live off of appreciation.
Yeah, it's impossible.
So, yeah.
Unless you got a lot of debt. So.
Yeah, you also mentioned, so the 1% rule used to be the 2% rule. I know that was big on bigger pockets for a long time. And that was like, it has to meet the 2% rule, but there are markets, like you mentioned, where it doesn't need to do either the 2 or 1% rule. So commercial, I know, is different. Do you use like a DSCR ratio when you're qualifying, or is there a certain metric that you use kind of like as a baseline qualifier, like, hey, this deal is worth looking into?
Yeah, DSCRs, this is probably not a great thing to say, but I really kind of attribute that to the bank. I don't really give a crap about that personally, because when I try to buy deals, seller financing. And my main metric that I'm trying to reach is a return, a cash on cash return for that matter. Cash on cash return, I want 15%, which is really, really difficult to get for the last couple of years. But they're still out there. I will buy at a 10% cash on cash return with a 15% pro forma. My own pro forma, not a realtor's pro forma. I want to actually underwrite these deals myself and make sure that I've got a good business plan to get me there. But I don't, cap rates only matter to me if I'm a seller. Really, I don't mind really care what the cap rate is if I'm a buyer, as long as I can hit my cash on cash. And I've already underwritten the market to make sure that, this is going to sustain the metrics that I want as far as growth goes. So that's the big one for me.
One of the things I like to highlight is that the pro forma. So a lot of people, they have pro forma models where they project you're going to make this amount of money. Well, if it can make this amount of money, why isn't it making this amount of money now? Can you kind of go over how you look at pro forma models?
Yeah, I make my own pro forma just based on appreciation rates and rents. My pro forma might look like, this is essentially a pro forma is what your business plan is going to get you to, right? So I'm going to be looking at this property from all different angles. Maybe I can get cheaper management, which I don't recommend doing, because if you try to, I'm not a proponent of trying to negotiate your management down on their prices, because all you're going to do is negotiate yourself into a lower service. Ask me how I know. I've done that before, and it sucked really bad. So, if a management company comes back and says, I'm doing 10%, I don't care how many units you have, then I'll just go to a different management company. I'll find somebody who's a little bit more reasonable. I pay 9% on 60 units right now. In one deal that I bought with 60 units. And I'm fine paying 9% because she is an awesome manager and does an incredible job implementing my business plan without asking me any, she questions me on things, which is good. You want that checks and balances, but sorry, I'm kind of getting on a side note there, but my pro forma is just everything that I can do in order to increase the income of the property. So I don't listen to anybody else's pro formas except for my own. You got to remember, these people, and especially when it comes to real estate brokers, they are trying to sell you a product. They're trying to make this thing look as good as they possibly can. And they are financially invested in that. They're going to make money whenever you end up buying it. So you have to kind of look out for yourself on that.
I was texting Tyler the other day when I was looking at a couple of properties. I was like, man, I'm talking myself out of a lot of these properties. And he's like, why? And I was like, because a lot of these properties, like I'm looking at like the growth of the economy around it, like there's on a decline. So I'm like, well, if they're in a decline, why would they have storage units? or like it's only like 75% full, and they're not going to get any more. If it's off the beaten path, or like I'm talking myself out of a lot of deals. You can talk yourself into and out of a lot of deals, but you really got to know like what you're getting into. And the pro forma models is a way for us used car salesmen to sell you the most beat up car at the highest price possible.
Absolutely. Yep. That's why you make your own. I agree
Yes.
100%.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't do that. They take the used car salesman's word at it when they've never even driven the car. They're just like, oh yeah, it's the best thing you can get since sliced bread. It's got these nice rims on it, and the tires are worn down to 5% left. But don't worry about that because it's got nice rims. So moving forward, like what's your goal for the future? Like what are you going after in the future? Do you have like you're gonna keep on the same path? Is your shiny object syndrome drawing you somewhere else? Like what's the plan?
Yeah. So, man, I like implementing some creative stuff. I bought a 60 unit in December of this last year, and it was 3 apartment complexes together. It was a 21 unit, a 20 unit, a 16 unit, and then 3 commercial buildings. And my plan with buying that was, all right, well, you kind of do the Costco approach and you buy in bulk. But then I'm going to sell everything off individually for a higher price, and that's exactly what I did. I had my business plan in order, which was increasing rents. They were averaging 575. I'm accomplishing 750 for all the turnovers right now. So once I get everything up to where it needs to be, I've created a significant amount of value. So I actually just listed one for sale, which was it was more, one of the 3 apartment complexes I listed for sale, and it was a HUD property. It was probably 75% Section 8 tenants in there. Just doesn't fit into my portfolio so well, not because of Section 8, just because of the style of the building. Didn't really care for it so much. So I listed it up and went under contract immediately. And so now that I've increased the value of the other 2, I'm negotiating with the bank not to change any of the terms of my loans, because essentially the property is still worth the same amount, which is $3 million, which is what I paid for it, even without this other one, because I added value to the other 2 apartment complexes. So I will be able to keep all the proceeds, even if I have to pay taxes on it. I'll be able to keep the $1.1 million of proceeds that I get from the sale of this place to do whatever I want with. We can pay cash for the house that we're building right now. We can kind of rearrange our lifestyle a little bit and kind of enjoy some of the fruits of our labor, and it'll still continue to cash flow. And on the long-term horizon, what we're looking to do is probably get into some Class A builds. We want to maybe go into some development stuff. I've got a partner out here in Oregon who's a real estate developer, and we've been discussing that pretty regularly, I guess. So we're looking at that in the longer term, maybe 1 to 2 years before we get serious about it.
Are you worried about how the market's going at all?
No, I'm not. I'm worried about it from the perspective of the middle class and having to pay these types of prices. That part sucks. Call that the political answer if you want, but the fact is I know there's a lot of people out there that aren't in business and aren't investing, that don't have big banking accounts, and this really sucks. Yeah. I lived as an adult through 2008, and I saw how absolutely disgusting it was. But I don't think it's going to be anything like that. I don't think we have the macro indicators there for that. So I think that there is going to be a slowdown, which is healthy. It's just, everybody thinks the sky is falling, and when anything changes, it doesn't matter what it is. The sky is falling. The sky is falling. Well, yeah, we're going to have a reduction in prices. It's going to happen. It is happening, especially in my area over here. Some areas aren't seeing it yet. They're a little bit slower to see the results of something like this. But over here, like in Portland, last month, 54% of houses that were listed for sale on the MLS got price reductions. We haven't seen that in a long time, so it's an indicator that we're going to see a slowdown. I'm okay with it. This kind of thing's healthy, and this is typically when people who are smart with investing in business, they do really well.
So that's a great rant.
Be greedy when there's blood in the street.
Yeah, right.
It's spot on. A lot of the data points nowadays, there's no historical data points that would indicate the same movement and trajectory. With the rates being so low and the short-term rentals being so popular, like there's false data points the last couple of years, and I worry that that's going to give people upside down on some properties, or they're going to go after things that that's going to be a negative in their future. But that's a whole nother podcast and different conversation to have. So let's highlight this on a final 2-question note. The first one is, I know you're an avid outdoorsman. I know you're a family man. Those come number one in your life. But what is your motivation moving forward to keep on investing?
Man, I tell you what, when you get a taste of the retired life, you don't really ever want to let that go. And there's nothing like being able to wake up and not do anything if you don't want to do anything. And you got nobody to answer to for that except for your family, right? That's a pretty amazing feeling. And I've created my business in a way where I don't do anything before 11 a.m. That's the whole reason why I scheduled this podcast for 11 a.m. because I get up at 7. I'm not sleeping till 11 a.m. Don't get me wrong, but I get up at 7 and go to the gym, come home, make a good hearty breakfast, sit down with my kids, hang out, because it's summertime, they're home. And then by 11 o'clock, I'll roll out to the office and check in on what needs checking in on and do some stuff with my properties if necessary. I've got a van business right now, which I just started this year. I have 3 Mercedes Sprinter vans that I rent out to people. That's become kind of my new baby that I'm spending a lot of time on. So I do that here at the office, and that's a lot of fun, just to see all the bookings come in and everything. And it's a great cash flow game. So it's not
who rents just a Sprinter van? Are you talking? Is this like bachelorette parties, like limousine type thing, or like?
Yeah, all the above. These are passenger vans. So they're not the camper vans like a lot of people are doing. These are passenger vans. So I have 12 and 15 passenger vans. We've had musicians. My very first booking that I've got with my very first van was a Rastafarian band. And they did their tour down the West Coast from Seattle all the way down to Southern California and into Phoenix. And it was, I've had a traveling preacher. I had another band.
Were they allowed to smoke in that band?
I wasn't going to bring that up. No.
I just see like the Cheech and Chong thing rolling up, man. Like,
they came out of the airport. And I'm not trying to be that guy that's, stereotyping or anything, but they came out of the airport with dreadlocks down to their waist, and they smelled like weed when they came off the plane. And I'm just like, shit, I'm going to get this thing back. It's going to take me 3 hours to clean it.
That's awesome.
They were the cleanest, greatest people, incredibly nice people, took really good care of my van. I almost didn't have to do anything to get it ready for the next renter. So, but yeah, I mean, I'm not actually doing all that. I hired a driver to take care of all that stuff for me just so I didn't have to do it. But it's just such a fun business to build. I'm going to get sick of it eventually. I know that about myself, but that's kind of my thing right now. And that shiny object syndrome kind of keeps me busy. But the real estate side of things, to answer your question, this is just keeping me grounded, keeping me stable. And that's my income. That's what I'm protecting at the most, but not giving the most attention to, I guess, because it's kind of on autopilot.
All right. My next question is going to be, if you can go back and give your younger self some advice, other than don't become a paramedic and get your dick beat into the dirt, what advice would you give yourself?
No, man, dude, I tell you what, I would be a firefighter and paramedic over again. I mean, it taught me an incredible amount about myself, and I don't think I would be as fired up as I am about life right now had I not gone through what I went through with the fire service. So it's definitely not that. I think what it would come down to is, don't be a shithead so late in life, and maybe start investing a little bit earlier. I think if I could have just done this, back in 2008 and really hit this investing game harder. I mean, everybody says the what if, the hindsight 2020 thing, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, but I guess that's kind of the question, what would you do differently? I would have done everything a lot earlier. And probably been a little bit more ambitious, because I'm super ambitious now. I'll take just about any chance out there because I have enough time if I screw up to fix it. So, I mean, I got a sign on my wall behind me that says failure is an option for a reason. I've made a lot of mistakes, and every single one of them have made me a better investor and a better person, better husband, better dad. And so I would just do it faster. I would do it sooner, and I would do it more aggressively.
That's a good answer. I like that. It feels like you can have more mistakes. The more money and the more time you have, you can make more mistakes. If you don't have time or money, it's harder to make those mistakes, though.
100%.
All right, guys. Tyler, Mike, you guys got anything you want to wrap up with?
No, it was good. I think we should have Kyle back on and talk about the other 5 businesses he has.
I agree. And I'm not going to let him say no.
Yeah, no, Kyle, thank you very much, man. It's just really cool to see somebody that's gone from like starting in the fire service around the same time I got hired, and like has just really taken that whole investing trajectory to a whole nother level. Cause it's like, it's very easy to sit back and be like, man, I should have done this. I should have done that. And sometimes like it's not good for you. Sometimes it's like, man, yeah, now if I see that opportunity, I'll know when to pounce on it. But sometimes it's easy to go the other way with it. Be like, man, screwed that up. Did that wrong. Should have started earlier, whatever. But it's cool to like you've taken it, just friggin' gone with it to the point where now you can not schedule anything till 11 a.m.
Right.
I think we're all 4 of us are probably the motivation factor. It's like you never really have to I never really have to try to get motivated to do stuff, right? But it's very easy to kind of lose sight of why you're doing it sometimes when you're so deep in the weeds. So I like that you kind of said, like, when it gets boring, that's kind of like a good point, because I feel like I haven't got to that stage yet. But I think that's one of my new goals is like, okay, I'm going to write up there, try and make all 4 of these businesses boring over here, because right now, I can't say that's the state we're at. So thanks for spending some time with us, man. I'd love to have you back on again, because there was 14 different topics we could have just spoke about, just those topics. And, then at the very last minute, you roll the hand grenade in about how you're renting Sprinter vans. So that's a whole nother thing, because we've been talking about renting trailers and dump trailers and stuff.
Do it, man. It's amazing. Well, it's amazing passive.
I just want to be the passive guy, because I need another shiny object squirrel project, like a hole in the head. So, yeah. Thanks for spending some time with us, man. And what's the name of your podcast? Because we want to make sure we share that and get it in the group and try and spread the love here.
Yeah, it's called Investories, and we're all over the place. You can find us on any of the podcast platforms.
Awesome. Kyle, the illustrious Scotsman Robertson, thank you for spending an hour with us, and I'll be talking to you here soon, buddy.
Awesome. It was fun, guys. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Thanks again for spending some time with us today. If you found value in anything you heard, please share with someone who may benefit. We look forward to connecting between shows in our Facebook group, First Responder Financial Freedom. Till next time.